it's me again, the Nutty Professor. And in the last podcast, which is this is a kind of a follow-up to that. In the last podcast, I talked about some of the issues involved in integration of shadow and facing my own shadow, and people who are struggling with issues and not turning back with addictions and dealing with their living in shadow to a certain degree. Now, before I get, there's a couple of things that I want to deal with here. One of the ways of processes involved in integrating shadow, and I want to go into some symbolism. But, before I get to that, a couple of concepts that I want to add. And these are, you know how I keep adding concepts to PATAP, my own personal system. So there was a concept I came up with recently, and it was I called it because I was thinking about cravings and how cravings are there all the time, and I would rate my cravings, scale of 1 to 10, sometimes 2, sometimes 8, sometimes 6, but they're sort of always there, and I thought about how when you walk on a bridge, for example, and I've heard other people say this to me too, you kind of feel the pull, and my first term for this was POBA, pull of the bridge analogy, and in this building it's like a 40-something story condo, and there is a rooftop outside where you can open the door, and I can never go outside. I can look outside the windows, but I cannot go through the door to the parapet and look down. I won't jump. I won't. But there's a pull. There's that kind of energy. It's like, oh my God, it's just that pull, and you have to fight it, and there's a bridge near here over a river, and sometimes I walk over the bridge and I don't want to jump, but you just feel the pull, and I thought of how, in terms of cravings. And so my first term was POBA, pull of the bridge analogy, but then I modified it to POTE, pull of the edge, and that the pull of the edge is sort of always there. Now, once I was crossing that bridge, and I was thinking about something else, and I had to go somewhere, and I didn't even notice when it was still there, but it was in the background. And when I came back across the bridge, I was like going, it was there, but I didn't really pay attention to it. And that's where I want to get with the cravings for other things. I want to just in the background, the kind of noise, but you don't pay attention to them. If you're focused on something else, if you're rechanneling, So, there's another concept that I want to remind you of. This is not my own. This is Freud's. It's come up in previous podcasts. I think it's the I'm Back podcast. And that's Freud's Eros and Thanatos. Eros, life instinct, Thanatos, and you see that's what I'm talking about, the pull. It's the death instinct. It's that, when you're crossing the bridge or you're on the high thing and there's that pull of that edge. It's the self-destructive, it's always there, So you've got life instincts and death instincts, Eros and Thanatos, Now, I have, as I said, I've had the cravings going up and down, and sometimes it feels to me like I go one step forward and 2 steps back. But then that is a, linear model, So the other thing is circles, and I sometimes feel like I'm going around in circles with the shadow stuff and the integrating shadow and the, cravings and the this and that. Circles, Now, there's a song, Post Malone, circles. I'm not sure if he's talking about exactly the same thing, but the idea here is, if the circles are going even fractionally up, then it becomes a spiral. But still, that's saying up, down, front, back, in, out, And there are so many terms that are opposites. Life, death, Eros, Thanatos, light, dark, all of these terms, that is actually one of the processes in Jungian theory is the reconciliation of opposites, or the unity of opposites. And one of the symbols that represents the unity of opposites is the yin and yang. So, and you can see that I think my editor will probably show you an example of it behind me. So the whole thing here is to try to reconcile these pairs of opposites, and in terms of this whole struggling with shadow and light and dark and all of that stuff, I want to now switch and go into some symbolic, kind of examples. Now, that I don't take symbols literally. We've talked about this before. I have a Bast, the cat goddess. I don't pray to it. I have a Buddha. I don't pray to it. I don't follow the Eightfold Path. I have, I've talked about my own concept, the inner werewolf. These are symbols, and I may have mentioned before that I'm in Jungian analysis, I analyze my dreams. And I've had some very major dreams. I've had some issues, there was some conflict, resolution. There was, they went from negative to positive to negative to positive. We kind of call those pairs of opposites, And at one point I had some very powerful dreams, and I do believe in dreams offering guidance and direction, and I had some very positive dreams that gave some guidance and direction, but I didn't follow them. That's me too, not necessarily following even my psyche or suggestions from the unconscious. Freud called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. Now I will talk about a couple of dreams in a minute, but before we get to that, there's another symbolic thing that happened. I'm not going into the circumstances of this, but I did see end up in sort of unusual circumstances with someone who is a tarot card reader, and this person, and I will say it's a she. She's a person who does tarot cards, and she did a reading for me. Now, it was very interesting the way this reading happened. There are round cards, and I've looked it up. I've had a deck myself a long time ago. Again, as I said, I don't take this stuff literally, but very symbolic from a Jungian perspective, And I had a deck. It's somewhere in a box. I don't know where it is now. But this is a round deck, And she had me think of a question, and I was going to ask a bit, very specific about addictions, and then I decided to keep it kind of a little bit more open-ended, and it ended up, and she kind of phrased it for me, how will 2020 play out for me? So I had to shuffle the deck while thinking of this question, and then close my eyes and pick 3 cards. And she had me, she said when she does it, she feels the heat and the energy, and I didn't feel any heat, but I had my eyes closed and I'm touching, and at one point it was between 2 cards, and I was touching both cards, and I was going this one or that one, this one or that one, and I picked the top one, and that turned out to be number 3. Which is kind of significant, what I'm going to do now is, and then she interpreted it based on, it depends on what your question is. If it had been a money question or a love question, then the interpretations would have been different. But because this was a how will 2020 play out for me, thing, kind of, general issues, in my future. Possibly, warnings. I did teach the critical thinking course. Remember, we talked about, my student was in it, who's not my producer, but that was one of the things that we talked about, confirmation bias. You look for things, you see them, and you interpret things in terms of, so it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't matter. At this point, I'm using this as a guide. Some things kind of fit, and it helped me. And there's 2 or 3 angles, and it really, and it fit my dreams as well. So we'll talk about all of that, So the 3 cards that I picked, and my producer is going to show them behind you, the first one is the World card, and you'll see, the World card, there's a woman, and she's surrounded by, there's a wolf, I think, in there, there's a lion, and wolves have shown up in my, podcast, and there's other animals, and the second one was enemies. Now, the enemies here are, they're fighting. They're very symbolic animals. One is a manticore, part lion, part human. And there's a book by Robertson Davies, Canadian writer, called The Manticore. And it's about a guy who goes to Zurich to be analyzed, Jungian analysis, and he has a big dream involving a manticore. But the manticore is fighting the phoenix. And the phoenix is the mythological bird that burns up and then the new one rises out of the ashes. Change, regeneration, moving beyond things like patterns and addictions. It actually came up a couple of years ago. Someone gave me a temporary tattoo of a phoenix because this person was saying you're going to rise above stuff that's happening. And then the third one is temporary stresses. And there's a woman person lying there, and there's a lot of stuff going on around them. There's snakes and there's rodents and there's but they're kind of they're temporary, and she's not paying attention, and they're going to pass. So she interpreted this. The first one, she said, the world in my context would be community. Being a part of the world, being a part of others, being connected, doing something for the community. The second one, she said, conflict, that there has been a conflict or there may be a conflict, but the whole thing is to not let it eat you, and not be consumed by the bitterness, and kind of, if not rise above it, but just kind of deal with it, and I have had a conflict with a former friend. Unfortunately, it's not going to work out, and I thought of this when the I don't think the friendship can never come back. The trust is gone. But after the reading and after I thought about this, rather than bitterness and anger, and I felt very betrayed by this person for not trusting me. But now I just feel sad. I just feel sad, and I don't think this person is going to be watching the podcast anymore. But if he or she is, bye. Good luck. All the best. But the friendship is gone. And there's another thing with the conflict. It could be there could be more than one thing. I used to have. My father was never my enemy, but we used to have conflicts. We used to fight quite a bit. But now that after his accident, he's in India. The conflict is just about we get along very well. I mean, maybe it was 8,000 miles apart, but he's very supportive of my podcasts. He really liked that last one. So there's a conflict that has been on and off. As I said, not enemies, but there's been a conflict that has been ongoing for many years. But it's kind of not resolved, but it's worked out. It was a major one. So there was that. And there's also conflict in terms of what I've been talking about in the other podcast, the inner conflict, the shadow, the light, and the dark, and the this and the reconciliation of opposites. Now I've had some dreams. And I had a dream maybe 2 weeks ago. Before some stuff happened, and it was a dream about mythological beasts that were being used. I mean, they're sort of slaughtered, but there was my neighbor who was using these mythological beasts. And I think there was a manticore in there. There was a phoenix, there was a unicorn, there was a Pegasus, a flying horse, but he was using these to grow vegetables. I'm a vegetarian, to feed me, to nourish me, And, this is the mythology and the collective unconscious, the history and all of that stuff, And I discussed this dream with my analyst, and in terms of some of the things that happened. And here we've got a card. We got both Manticore and the Phoenix. Now after that, I had a dream after this conflict with a friend, where in the dream I had the same conflict with the same friend. And I was at his or her house, and I went to the bathroom, and there was crap all over, and I had to clean it, stuff I had to clean up, stuff not resolved, So I'm cleaning the bathroom, and then I go out, and the neighbors They had some wood, but they were going to build a shed to help the community, for drug users and a place for people to be safe, And I said, look, I will fund it. You build it. You put the labor, but I will. Now, my interpretation of this is that not literally. I'm not intending on building a shelter, but my sharing this, my podcasts, my writing, is a bit struggles, and if it helps other people, fine, that's what I want to. So that's my interpretation of the dreams and of the reading. Now the third thing, and this is a third card, and this is the one that is the most positive. According to the card, according to the reading, it's the stressors, the struggles, the inner and the outer struggles that I'm facing right now. Temporary, the person is sleeping through all of this, you got the snakes and you got the rodent weasels and you've got all of this stuff, So, that is, and the reading came at a time when I was dealing with some issues, and it kind of helped give me perspective, and it's symbolic, So let's just hope that third card, and it's given me, and I want to keep doing the podcasts, I want to keep, and my last podcast, as I said, I did dedicate it to the people who are struggling, and I really do think that people should be provided with safe places, where they can, safely, engage in habits and so on, So, and there's a book that I kind of thought of in connection with all of this, Joseph Conrad, Hearts of Darkness, and it's a sea captain who goes down a river. There's a captain who's gone mad, Now, people are probably more familiar with, there's an adaptation of it into a movie form, Apocalypse Now, and Marlon Brando played the captain who had gone mad, and his kind of the horror, that's part of it. It's the dark, but then there's also the light, and the other one comes back, the journey back to society, So I don't want to be the Marlon Brando one, I want to be the Martin Sheen one, I want to be the one who comes back, I don't want to be the one stuck there in the horror. So, once again, I'll keep you posted, Nutty professor trying to stay nutty and not turn into a Marlon Brando psycho character. So take care, I'll let you know how the battle goes. Bye.